Hello, this is Dr. Dan. In this video, I am going to provide you with a strategy to help you write a literature review. This will especially help out students, writers, scholars, educators, so on, who struggle tracking large amounts of literature and writing a paper or a research article or something of that nature when they have perhaps 50, 100, 150 articles that they need to read and write about for a literature review. I have found this strategy very helpful, efficient, effective, and hopefully it'll help you. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing we'll do here is I've prepared for you a couple different, first off, I've prepared for you here a document that I've actually began to create, as well as some articles that I used as examples. What we will do is I will show you how you will essentially in 2 steps read an article and begin to write about that article. All right, that may sound a little confusing at first, but let's go ahead and go through the process and I will show you. First off, many individuals will use spreadsheets. There's software available. Some people will actually print articles and keep them in file folders and things. While that does maybe a good job of organizing all of the articles, it does not necessarily do a good job organizing the content of the articles. Most people are unable to remember where they get information from articles. Perhaps you'll have experienced this where you read an article in the past and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I remember there was something really good in an article. I can't remember which one it was. Well, now multiply that by 50, 100, 150 times and how confusing, demotivating, and just just how much that will not help you get your project done. So here is a strategy again that I use myself, and many students that I've taught absolutely love this strategy. All right, what do? Well, the first thing you do is you pick an article. So like in this case, I have this article by Eva et al. And the topic is servant leadership. What I do is I take a Word document. In this case, I have this title, which is for this presentation. And then the topic I'm exploring is servant leadership. So I will type those 2 things in. Next, I read the article. As I'm reading the article, you can see here I have information that's highlighted. These are things that I find to be especially interesting about the article and perhaps important for my paper. Now, when I discover something on those first couple things there, I highlighted, I did not necessarily use them. But then I found something that was especially interesting that I want to use, and that is how these authors define servant leadership based on their examination of 285 articles. So the 285 articles that, and forgive me for scrolling around a bit, but I need to do that, that I found in the abstract. And then I found this definition later on as I was reading the article, and I combined information to create, if you look over here on the right-hand side, this first bit of information from the Eva et al. Article. So I typed this out. I cited the source, typed out what I discovered in a comprehensive review of 285 studies, so on and so forth, how they defined servant leadership. Now, I also began to create a reference list. So what you see in green is the Eva et al. Article. Okay, so to help you, I don't color code these myself. I did this for this presentation. So you'll see I use that here. Let's scroll back up. Then I kept reading the article. I discovered that they did a study on they discovered, excuse me, a limited number of mixed method designs, which I found that interesting. So I entered that over here. Oh, and by the way, I started creating section headings. This is especially important because it's going to help us keep our information organized as we discover more and more studies that fit within each of these section headings. So for the first one here, I created a servant leadership defined section heading because Eva et al. This information is about the definition. Next, this is included in research methods because they talked about a limited number of mixed methods design, so I created a section heading called mixed methods. Then I discovered, and I'll come back to something else later, that they reported most studies were done in one country, and they recommended studies be done with samples drawn from multiple countries. So not only do I create here a section heading called sampling, but I also create another subheading called countries. I may change this later, but that works for me now. Then, let's scroll down here. There's nothing else in green, so that's all I found from that article, with one exception. I remembered later on that they talked about measures. So I'm going to go back to that article later on, but for now, we're not going to do that. So for now, we are going to move on to our second article. So we chose this information from this article that was important, and many times I will not even come back to this article again. In this case, I will for the measures information, but many times I don't. All right, now let's go on to this WU article. So same thing, we start from the beginning, we start reading the WU article, and I highlight information that I found especially important, including the results of the study. I go to my paper, and as I discover this information, I do not read the entire article and then go back to it, which you could. You could read everything and highlight important information, then go back to the beginning. You'll definitely learn a lot about the article. I, however, will read through it the one time, highlight information, and as I find information, I will enter it into my paper. Now, there's an exception to that, and that is because I want to summarize information, and I'm not necessarily just, copy pasting information out here. We don't want to do that. We want to summarize information. Sometimes if it's reported results, there's only so many ways you could paraphrase that information. But other times you might find a general theme in the article, so that's where you'd go back and then you'd add something else. But for now, we're just taking information from the article and entering in our paper. And results is a great example of that. All right, so now this is the WU article, and after I was reading through it, I realized they conducted 3 studies, 2 laboratory experiments, 1 correlational design, which is very fitting in the research methods section. Then, and similarly later on, I said, I need to go back and see what measures they use. I'm going to add that to the measures information. Then I discovered that they did a study in 10 organizations in Singapore, which fit well within this countries section I already created. They also explored different industries. So now I created another section heading called industry, which falls within the sampling subsection. And then finally results, and I reported some of the results of these studies because I found that especially interesting. And of course I created a reference for that. Now let's go back to the beginning again. This time we're going to get a third article. In the third article, what did I do? Same thing. I start from the beginning, scroll up, start highlighting information that's important. I start entering that into my paper, and in this case everything's in yellow for this article. I did not find anything necessarily for these 2 sections. I did find that there's measures they use, so I want to go back and add in this information. I also discovered they had some Chromebook Alpha scores, which gave me an idea. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go back to those first 2 articles and find Chromebook Alpha scores and see if they had those in there. And one of those articles out of the 2 might work. So I highlighted this here, just I know I'm going to come back to that. Now scroll down further. They conducted a study in Bulgaria among students. That fits very well in my sampling section again, especially in the countries subsection. And I reported the results of their studies. And I did find that they had something interesting regarding the subtopic of gender. So under results, I create another section heading called gender, and I report the results. And then of course I create a reference listing. As you can see, you can continue to do this for your 4th, 5th, 10th, 20th, 50th article, 100 articles. You continue to do this process. And what you end up with is all of this evidence that's nicely organized, that once you have finished your review of those articles that you want to include in your literature review, you may add more later, but once you're finished with this, now what you can do is go back and begin to insert, let's say, your own explanations, perhaps examples you want to provide of some other things, transition sentences, topic sentences. All of that information you will begin to now insert so your document has a nice flow to it. And that is the strategy. you will find this to be a very effective writing strategy that I have to believe will help most people write a comprehensive literature review. Thank you, and I hope this helps you.